Earlier, I began my series on Beauty for Ashes. And in that series, we were talking about how God can take things that seem like a disaster, things that seem like they're not going well, and He can turn those things into a thing of beauty. And that's what we're going to continue to talk about today, how God turns things that seem like they're a tragedy into beauty. Hi, I'm the one that shares this is 2 Cute Life Lessons, and we're going to get right into this video. Beauty for Ashes. The last time we talked about Beauty for Ashes, we were talking about the relationship of Ruth and Boaz. We talked about how God had set them up for a miracle, how He had set them up to be in the lineage of Jesus, and how God had miraculously been working behind the scenes from the very beginning to transform these people's relationship, to give them a miracle, to give them a blessing. Well, today we're going to look at another character. But first, I want to ask you, have something ever happened to you in your life and it seemed like it was such a disaster? It seemed like God didn't know, or He didn't understand, or He's lost control of everything that was going on. And maybe you were hurt. Maybe you were disappointed. You didn't quite know what to do. You didn't know how to respond. Doors were closed that you thought would always be open. Well, sometimes closed doors are not a mistake. Closed doors are actually a blessing. Sometimes God has to close some doors for us in order for us to receive a miracle. I'll give you one example. I've given this example several times before, but I'm going to give it to you again. I was recently at a job that I love. Fortunately, an incident came up where I ended up leaving that job. It was a whole big thing, and it seemed like such a inconvenience, such a tragedy, such an issue that I had to go through. And I remember thinking, God, you can do all things except fail. Why don't you go ahead and take care of this? I wanted it to be over quickly. It was not. It drug on for about 6 whole months. 6 months. And in the course of time, I began to feel depressed. I began to question myself. I began to look at things. I wasn't going to give up, but I was disappointed. I was hurt. I was like, God, what are you doing? Are you trying to show me something? Are you trying to show the other person something? What is the purpose of what is happening? But in the course of time, I ended up leaving that job, and I took a job somewhere else, and I took a job that paid me more money, that was in the same field in which I was working, that required me to use some skills that I had not used at the job in which I left. When I look back on it now, I realize God was working behind the scenes the whole time to get me in the position in which He needed me to be. If it were up to me, I would have never left that job. Never. I would have never taken a position that was more than the position in which I had. Because at my age, I got to the point where I wasn't ready to take risks. I wasn't ready to step out on something else. I was ready to be comfortable. I was ready to relax because I had been with that school district for 10 years. So no, I wasn't trying to go anywhere else. And I'm thinking about retirement. No, that was not something I wanted to do. But God knew. God knew, and He was working behind the scenes to get me into a position in which He wanted me to be. I'll give you another example before I go into who I'm talking about. I had a friend, and I'm going to say her name is Mary. Just pretend her friend named Mary. And she suffered a loss. Her house, a portion of her house caught on fire. And it was burned. And she was so hurt and she was so distraught. And the very day it happened, you know, she was sitting there going through all of the symptoms, all of the emotions, all of the hurt. She was like, I don't understand why this happened to me. God, what is going on? But I told her, because I felt in my spirit right then, I said, Mary, God is going to give you something better than what you had. Even though she couldn't understand it at the time. In the end, when they finished, when the insurance money paid off and everything was done, she ended up getting a house. Her house was remodeled. She ended up getting to fix an addition onto her house. She had more in the end than she had in the beginning. Just like Job. He ended up with more in the end than he had in the beginning. And we all know that he is a perfect example of beauty coming from ashes. But he is not the guy in which we're going to talk about today. Today we are going to talk about Joseph. And I know I talk about Joseph a lot on this channel, but he is such a phenomenal character. He has so many lessons that we can glean from what happened to him. We know he was the favorite son. And God, we don't need to play favorites with our children. We don't need to play favorites at all. But that is a video for another time. But he was his daddy's favorite. And everybody knew he was his daddy's favorite. And so his brothers were jealous of him. And the thing was, he told them of the dreams he had. God was sharing with him his future. He was sharing with him the things that were going to come to pass later in his life. He was telling him of the position in which he was going to have. But Joseph, like so many of us, told the secret. He shared with his brothers what God shared with him. He was thinking that, okay, they are going to be happy for me. They're going to be excited about all the things that God is going to do. But he was telling his brothers that basically the sun and the moon are going to bow down to me, and the stars. And his brothers knew exactly what he was saying. He was saying that his father and his mother and even them, they would all bow to him. And so they were not happy with this. First of all, because remember, he was the favorite. His daddy made no secret of the fact that he was the favorite. And so they saw this as another insult. And so some of them within their hearts decided, we need to do something with him. We need to get this guy out of here. And so when opportunity arose, when they saw Joseph coming from far off, they decided that they were going to kill him. They decided they were just going to get rid of him. They were going to kill him. So instead of killing him, Reuben pleads for his case, and he convinces his other brothers not to kill him. Instead, they decide to sell him. They sell him to a caravan of Ishmaelites that are headed to Egypt. And we know Egypt is a representation of a place that we don't want to be. It's a place of captivity. But to make a long story short, we all know the story of what happens to Joseph. He goes, he is sold into slavery, but he is, even in his position as a slave, he still honors his God. Then he is unjustly accused by Potiphar's wife of trying to molest her, and he's thrown into prison. And it's in prison that he meets the baker, and he meets the butler, and eventually, through the course of time, he gets to meet Pharaoh. And Joseph is able to interpret dreams, and it's the gift that God gives him that allows him to become the second in command in Egypt. We know that this could have ended another way. This could have gone to the left. God could have, well, not God, but Joseph could have become very bitter. Because when you look at all of the things that happened to him, when you look at the tragedies that were surrounding him, he was in a state of ashes. When you think about, you know, when we read the story now, we think, oh, this happened, this happened, this happened. It happened quickly. It happened in the course of 1 or 2 years. But no, this went on for years. Can we truly say that we will remain faithful to God, that we will remain faithful to our cause if something like this were to happen to us? And because of where he ends up, because of him being second in command in Egypt, not only does he assume a position of power, just like he dreamed, just like God promised him, but also he is able to not just save himself, but he's able to save his whole family. And in saving his whole family, he saved the line of Jesus. He saved all of the Jewish people that were to come. All of us, all of the Christians, we all came through this same lineage because he was sent down to Egypt so that his family might be saved in a time of famine. God knows our ending from the beginning. God sees our todays, our yesterdays, and our tomorrows all in one glance. Give you another good example. Years ago, and I mean this had to be over 10 or 15 years ago, I was working somewhere, and anyway, I had a person that ended up not needing their Brumarol treatment. This is stuff we put in respiratory treatments. But anyway, they didn't need, somebody had some extra left over. That's why I take it. And at the time, I didn't need it. I took the Brumarol, and I maybe pronounced a Brumarol wrong. But anyway, I took it home. I put it in my cabinet. I forgot about it. Really, literally. Never crossed my mind again. And then I became sick back here about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I needed a breathing treatment. And lo and behold, I woke up, I couldn't breathe. I said, Lord, what am I going to do? And the Lord led me to my cabinet. He led me to that Prevails, and he led me to that humidifier that I had stuck under my bed. And that's literally where I had stuck it in the box. And it had been under there for about 5 years. And I'd never taken it out. And so I was led to take it out. My humidifier, I was led to put the Prevails into the humidifier and cut it off because I did not have a nebulizer. And it came to me clear as a bell. I said, you know what? God knew the day this person gave me this Prevails, this breathing treatment medicine, that I was going to need it. That I was going to wake up in the middle of the night wheezing. That I was going to wake up short of breath. I was going to wake up with chest congestion. And I would need that treatment so that I didn't have to go to the emergency room and be given a breathing treatment there. It's amazing how God knows just what we need. And he orchestrates our circumstances to fit those needs. God can take something that we see as ashes and turn them into things of beauty. I'll give you an example. I have a friend has recently lost their job. And it is very devastating to this person. And I do understand how it is when you lose a position in which you've been at for years. You lose that income and it can be devastating. But God spoke into my spirit. He told me, he said, this person lost their job, but I'm setting them up for something better. So I don't know if better means a better job or if better means you're going to be taken care of, because this person works very heavily in the position of ministry. And so when I heard this, I knew, I said, God may be freeing up their time so that they can do more work and get more done. God is going to replace that income. He's going to do everything he needs to do in order to take care of that person. God is going to turn that whole situation around to bring this person beauty for their ashes. So when you're sitting in a place that seems real low, when you're battling with that depression, when you're listening to those voices that are telling you to give up, it's hopeless, nothing good is going to come of this, that God doesn't love you anymore, I want you to know God does love you. God does know what he's doing. God has a plan for you. He told us in his word that he knows the plans that he thinks towards us to give us a future and a hope. God is not confused. We may be confused, but God is not confused. God is the ultimate potter. We are his clay. He shapes and molds us. He shapes and molds our circumstances to fit just what he needs them to fit. So I thank you guys for listening. Again, this has been LaWanda Shields with 2 Cute Life Lessons, talking about beautiful ashes. This is the second installment in my